Hello and welcome to Black, Brown, and Bilingual, where our mission is to unite the Black and Brown communities through education, storytelling, and community engagement.
The vision of Black, Brown, and Bilingual is to be part of creating a world in which Black and Brown identities are affirmed, bilingualism and biculturalism are nurtured, and equity is the driving force behind all that we do. Thank you for tuning in again today. I am one of your hosts, Lisette Jacobson.
And I'm Maurice McDavid, your other host.
Folks, you are in for a treat today. We are very excited to have Dr. Ba with us today. He is a professor at NIU. Some of his recent courses taught are racial and ethnic relations, sociology of education, and sociological theory and migration. He's also been awarded the 2017 United Nations Peacebuilding Support Office and Peace Nexus Foundation grant. And he's also received the 2016 Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship for universities as potential sites for radicalization and impacts on state building. Dr. Ba, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm here.
So we were thinking about what guests we would like to have on the show, and you were immediately someone that we thought of because you are actually multilingual. And part of our vision at Black, Brown, and Bilingual is to have voices that can kind of show us the importance of being bilingual. And in your case, you are multilingual. So before we jump into that, though, could you tell us a little bit more about your personal life and your professional experience?
Well, I'm fortunate to have a wife and three children, 2 boys and a daughter. All of them are, everyday inspirations. And we've been here in DeKalb since 2003. I think professionally, I am, a scholar, first and foremost, of, democracy, peace and conflict, and everything that goes on, I guess, in the making of the multi-ethnic, multiracial kind of society or state. I guess what we call typically divided, societies or countries. And, as an academic, I've been a professor at NIU since 2003. And I also edit the journal African Conflict and Peacebuilding Review. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the, I guess, academic things. Of course, I'm a lifelong learner. Every day I'm learning something. I do also have interest in technology. So, and I also see that as, part of, if we wish, expanding the language of minorities.
Could you tell the listeners a little bit of background, like where you're from and kind of your journey? Like what led you to NIU?
Well, life is already a series of good accidents. I don't know whether I should be saying this in public or not, but, I am not actually connected to places. Mm. And by no means I actually mean to imply that I'm not connected to people. Mm-hmm. But somehow my experience has actually been one in which place is just where I happen to be at any given point in my life. So I think what stays more for me really is relations. So in that sense, I am trans-place, transnational, trans, and so forth. But I think it is just, it's just a result of the accident of my own, small biography. Born in, in Sierra Leone, West Africa. The parents also and grandparents who actually moved across Africa. So, we are Fulani people. And Fulani people, by definition, are always are all over the world, certainly all over from West to East Africa. And so I guess moving has been part of that. And in Sierra Leone, I lived in 2 different cities. And after that, I was in Bulgaria, where I did my undergraduate education, and then to New York, where I did my at the New School for Social Research, where I did my doctorate, and then here in DeKalb. So, I'm still young, kind of. So, and I can count so many places where I've lived that. So I think I guess I've come to accept that place is just where I happen to be at a given time.
Well,
But
that
I think
certainly has.
But I think the point. So I think when I think of where am I from, I think of it more. I guess what am I and who I am, and what do I belong to, more so than actually the physicality of the places themselves.
So, first off, I love that idea. I love that thought process that you're connected more so to people and what you are, as opposed to where that specific location. That being said, I obviously place does tend to impact and influence our experiences. Can you tell us a little bit? You came from Sierra Leone as a place. You ended up here in DeKalb, Illinois. Few stops along the way, including Bulgaria and then New York. What can you tell us about your experience as a Black immigrant in Europe and now in the U.S.? And what I'll say is, and maybe this is a comparison, maybe you just talk about it in general, but when we say immigration here in the United States, we often think of immediately Mexican, right? Or some type of, some person from a Spanish-speaking country when we say immigrant. Well, here you are, as an immigrant, but a Black immigrant. Maybe, tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so I think I guess I can talk about that in 2 ways. I guess one is a normal way, which I'm part of. And the other way is really, how I see those things and how I guess subjectively feel and approach them, which is the subversive way. So I think the normal way, and that is also part of my experience as an immigrant, or somebody who has moved to somewhere else, you come with actually certain kinds of, I guess what I would say, challenges and endowments, gifts. Gifts of knowledge of other places and things and ways of seeing the perseverance and so forth. When you come to a new place, of course, you have to learn. If you don't know the language, you have to learn the language. If you know the language before you came, you have to adjust the way you talk the language. Mm-hmm. And, you have to, I guess you have to adjust to the practicalities of things. But ultimately, I think the question is, I guess, once you set into a place, is how do you actually see yourself there? And whether you see yourself as being here for a time and you're going back to where you came from, or you are here and you're making life of it as it is. So in my case, I think my experience has actually been one. I consider it as a blessing. Not necessarily everything is pleasant, but I think of myself as being blessed to have things that other people haven't had, not because of any, I guess, innate qualities in me, but I just assume that is what has the Lord has destined for me, and I do my best to fulfill that. And the experience, I think, as a Black person, of course, when you come here in the United States, the first and foremost thing you understand that you are. You get into certain categories of persons, and this is just a basic fact. All Black immigrants who come to the United States their first home is actually among African Americans. You can go back to I guess to the Africans who came here on their own back in the 40s and 50s and so forth. Their first home was in Harlem, and Harlem was precisely the place where you have African Americans. So I think even you look at the where recent Black immigrants stay, they stay among African Americans, and so I think there's that kind of like connection right there as a people. And also, of course, the fact that, the society actually puts you all together. But along the way, I think, as you settle in, you begin to understand the deep histories. I think the challenge becomes, how do you really, I guess, get a sense of the bigger picture, but also without losing sight of the little details. So I think, I guess that is the way I'll frame the normal experience or the way I have lived that. But sincerely, I think I have long stopped seeing myself as an immigrant. Not here, not where I was before, and not where I may go. I know that the laws of the books define everybody by a location as a citizen or somewhere or whatnot. But I see myself as somebody who, at any given point, by the will of the Lord, I am in a given place and I have to live there, and I make the best of it. So I really don't see myself as an immigrant in the sense that I don't belong. Wherever I am, I think I belong there. As a human being, I belong there. As a person who actually put effort, I belong there. So, and I don't really think that anybody owns a place. We are all actually custodians of places. So I guess if I can say, I reject the idea of somebody being, quote unquote, I am the native and own it, and I am the immigrant. I think the question for us is actually how we can all, treat one another fairly and equally, and be nice to one another. So now, if people allow that, good. If they don't allow that, then we have to make it work.
You sound very enlightened, Dr. Ba, right? I think the most enlightened people, though, tend to think that way. And unfortunately, our history here in the United States has really played a part in how we group each other, right? And how we categorize each other. Do you feel that your experience in Europe is different than what you experienced here? And if so, how did it differ?
Yeah, it is different in so many ways. Age-wise, it's a different time. So, I used to get the question a lot in New York. How was it in Bulgaria? And and I will tell them, well, it was a fruitful but not necessarily pleasant experience. So in Bulgaria, at the time that I was there, I was in my early 20s. So you can see how, I guess the way you see and experience the world. I was in a place where, by definition, it wasn't an immigrant country. Bulgaria was in a typical East European country built around the idea of national identities and so forth. But also I was there in a kind of like a secluded environment, in the sense that I was a student at a university, and for their purposely just to complete my university education and leave. So I think it was for a defined time. But the other thing also that was wonderful in some ways, that so in Bulgaria, they actually, at least in Sofia, that is the capital city of Bulgaria, they had a system where they had hostels for all the universities in the city, built in one place, which they call Studentski Grad, that is the student city. And number two, again, out of Cold War politics, Bulgaria actually used to have students from many, many developing countries, virtually nearly every African country possibly, many from Latin American countries, many from South Asian countries, Vietnam. I had a Japanese roommate. So you talk of actually like 60, 70 buildings where Bulgarian students and all these foreign students from different countries live, young people. So that is, it is an extremely diverse place. Of course, not anything like Bulgaria, because we just happen to live there. But I think that was a wonderful experience for me, and I think it prepared me for a place like New York, because I, for the first time, really lived in a truly global village, literally. Colleagues, friends from Bangladesh, Nigeria, Angola, Japan, you name it. And I remember this guy, from Honduras, no, actually from Guyana. He was a black guy from Guyana. He was the friends with the Africans. And so Bulgaria was kind of like a bubble in some ways, but also I lived there at a time when the country was going through the transition from communism to democracy and market economy. Mm-hmm. So it was a very challenging time economically and socially. Hardship and so forth. So I think all of that, prepared me, I think, to come back to compare that. When I came to New York, lived in the Bronx, went to school in New York City, in Manhattan every day. So I was comfortable being among white people, and I was among white people when I was at a new school in downtown Manhattan. When I went to the Bronx, I was among black people. I'm comfortable with that too. So, and I recall actually, and this is actually the little visuals. When I take the train from my house, the last stop on the 5, going to the city, the train will be black people all the way. And as you begin to get like around 87th Street, you begin to get white people coming, so it gets more wider and wider, and coming back the same. So again, you get that visual kind of like everyday reminder of the demographics of the city and what that all means. And to bring it to DeKalb, in some ways, DeKalb is like going back to Bulgaria in some ways. It's more rural and so forth. But anyway, yeah. So I guess that's what I can say.
Awesome. So, Dr. Bao, one of the things that you mentioned in kind of this process of immigration was talking about learning the language, and if you already speak the language, making sure you're speaking the language properly. Can you tell us a little bit, about that language learning for you? How many languages do you know, and how did you go about learning those languages?
Right. Yeah. So you learn languages naturally, if you're in the environment, and you learn them, out of a technical institutions or, schools and, through books and schools. So in Sierra Leone, virtually all of us are multilingual because there's one common language in the country, which is Creole. But nearly most of us also have another language, or the cultural or ethnic group to which we belong, and they have a language. And most of the languages, they are part of like Mandi or kind of like those kind of languages. So in my case, I grew up, speaking Fula in my house with my parents. And when I get to the streets, I speak Creole. And when we get to school, they teach us in English. So Creole and Fulani actually became, those are like my two, natural languages. English was something that we learn we learn and use in the four walls of the school building, and you learn how to read and write and those things. So, and I think I acquired English in Sierra Leone. In Bulgaria, backtrack, I also, I do, so growing up, so I had two educations in Sierra Leone. One is the formal education, which is the English national program that we do, but also I learned religious education, which is like a homeschooling, which is common most kids do. But as Muslims, we learn how to read the Quran and pray and those sort of things. So I acquired some elementary kind of like level of Arabic, not so much as a Arabic speaker, but actually as somebody who is able to read the religious text in the Arabic language and also understand it. So I do have a basic understanding, basic to medium level, knowledge of Arabic coming out of Syria. Now, in Bulgaria, I never had somebody speak Bulgarian before I went to Bulgaria. But arriving there, you first understand that, you'll be going in university your curriculum is in Bulgarian. That's it. So the way the system works is that as international students, when you come there, they will put you in one year intensive language program, which you will do. And after that, they throw you into the university with the Bulgarian students, and you do everything with the Bulgarians. So I did a language program like everybody else. and then to the University of Sofia, curriculum in Bulgarian, and learned that. So in retrospect, I mean, I have also asked, well, how is that possible? And really, it is not anything too ingenious. I mean, again, as I told you, there are thousands and thousands of students who have gone there and done that. So in retrospect, what I've realized is that when you learn a language, especially in that kind of like technical kind of context, you learn the language selectively. In other words, you build vocabulary, so you learn the basic, grammar and those sort of things, but you build vocabulary that are in relation to really your life experiences or your work. So after 5 years in Bulgaria, I mean, I was very fluent in Bulgarian, but the truth of the matter is that actually my Bulgarian language, or the body of words that I know, are mostly things that are relevant to social, economic, and political issues, because that was what I was studying. And in comparison, for example, like the medical students who were there, their vocabulary was much more, stronger in body parts and those sort of things, So, and I always tell people, I'm very fluent in Bulgarian. I wrote an article in Bulgarian, but actually, if you were to take me into a house and begin to show me some basic household utensils, I wouldn't know the names of most of those things, because we live in a hostel, So, so anyway, and I do also speak French. I will say that is up to I can read fairly good, and I can speak fairly good. Writing not too very great, but I learned most of the French actually in Bulgaria. Ironically, So in Syria, of course, I mean, they introduced us to one, foreign languages, French, which we did like very basic things. I mean, I happened to go to neighboring countries in West Africa that speaks French, but when I was in Bulgaria, so the rule was that Bulgarian students have to take a foreign language, and they offered German, French, English, and so forth. Now, for international students, we were still taking, when you're in the university, you still take Bulgarian as a language. So we were not required to actually take a foreign language except just take Bulgarian. But it was a time when Bulgarians were actually very much interested in the West, and they were learning languages like crazy. Every Bulgarian wanted to learn English, French, or German. And the university really provided a very good French language program, and like others. So while I knew English, I didn't thought that I was going to use a lot of German. I said, hey. So I joined the French class. So I took French classes in my first, second, and third year at the University of Sofia. And I hang out with the students from the French-speaking West African countries a lot. I bought a book. I was after this guy, Dudu. He always teaching me. So yeah, so anyway, so that is the way actually I acquired this thing. Now, to changing the way you speak, or of course, I mean, when you move, so in this case, coming to the United States with speaking English globally, the way they speak in Sierra Leone, when you come here, the challenge is, of course, you want to be understood, but you don't want to be disrespected. And what that means, organically, I guess I, modify, change the way I speak. But when people talk about accent and whatnot, I challenge them. I tell them, no, I don't have an accent. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, I don't. I mean, accent is a matter of subjective thing. So, but anyway, I contest the idea that this is the only way they're speaking. So I really don't worry so much about how I speak. I think it evolved, it evolved organically, but, I think it is also, it's on other people also to understand how other people speak, in as much as we try to speak to the way they want us to hear them. So it's a 50-50. That's my position.
I love that. We always try to tell, because here in the US with the Latino population, we really try to get them to embrace Spanish. And, bilingual education here has really evolved. Whereas before it was, you're in a bilingual program and we're going to let you, we're going to teach you English. And so then you don't need that Spanish. And so it's full immersion into English. Well, now we understand the benefits of being a bilingual learner. And before we used to think, it's going to confuse people. It's going to get them behind if they speak two languages, but we know that couldn't be further from the truth. Do you think that knowing multiple languages has benefited you? Or could you speak to how being multilingual essentially has impacted your life?
I mean, I know sometimes, I mean, people get impressed by how many languages you speak. I guess it gives you like some little kind of like kudos.
You're
But
so
I think,
humble.
right, yeah, but I
Kind of
think,
a big deal.
right, yeah, yeah. I think really, I mean, to give it some really thought, I think the real benefit of being multilingual is not so much, I mean, certainly, yeah, if you need to like say something to somebody, you'll be able to say, but, you know, if you speak English, you'll be able to speak to a lot of people in the world, wherever you go. But I think the benefit really of being bilingual, multilingual really is to have a sense of other people and cultures and ways of living. Language is really, it's not just about, you know, I guess the mechanics or the technicalities of how do we hear one another or understand one another. But I guess to understand, I mean, language is culture, language is people. So when you understand a language, what it really also means that you have understood a particular culture, a certain kind of worldview, a certain kind of perspective. So for me, really what my language is actually, I guess the benefit of the languages that I speak is not so much the practical day-to-day things. You know, I barely use most of these languages on a day-to-day basis. But I think they have allowed me to actually see human beings, the world, society's issues through multiple lenses. I can see through the lens of a Fulani person. I can see through the lens of a Bulgarian. I can see through the lens of a Western, you know, Caucasian person. I can see through the lens of you know, an African person. So, but I think it is embedded in the language. I mean, so I think that is really the way I think of it.
I love that.
The benefit of that second language, and again, I am going to come back and listen to this myself so I can make sure I quote you correctly when we tweet it. But the benefit is not just the technical and the skill base of speaking or reading or writing a language, but it is the lens into culture. And that is just absolutely key, I think, to having a more global perspective and understanding the humanity, right, that exists in all of us. So I think there is something to be said about the power of language and kind of the status that it gives you in society. What's kind of your opinion on that? Do you believe that knowing more than one language impacts one's status in society? And can you talk a little bit more even about that idea of the accent, right? And the impact of an accent in terms of your status in society?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, you know, we are all judgmental, you know, and nobody's to be faulted for that. I mean, we all, you know, see people, we don't know much about them, so you begin with some kind of opinion, some kind of judgment, and typically those judgments is about how we look and how we sound, you know, the other part is like, you know, the context and those who actually make those judgments. So I think, in my experiences, I think. You know, for people who, you know, find themselves in, I guess, in more challenging situations, environments on a day-to-day basis, either being challenged by place of poverty or ignorance, or places where somehow the people that you're dealing with are, you know, are less exposed and have less, I guess, means. They tend to actually focus more on those little things. So your accent actually becomes a problem. Like, you know, your name becomes a problem. You know, and the flip side of that is that when you are actually in circles where, I guess, among people who are fortunate to have more education, more cultural diversities, more, you know, resources, somehow all of those things actually becomes benign. I mean, nobody sees that. The people easily see past that. So if I was to walk to a bar, which I wouldn't do, but if I do, they will notice my accent first. That is what they will care about. Now, if I was to actually walk into some kind of like, you know, meeting at a, you know, government agency with an appointment, or to be in a faculty meeting, nobody's going to hear my accent, I assume. So I think, those kinds of little baggages here and there. I mean, I think it comes to really to question how whether people understand you, or they can make a fair judgment about you, and the less they know, possibly the less they'll be able to do that. And in that sense, all those little things becomes issues until they can clear that up for themselves, that they realize that, oh, your accent doesn't mean that you're dumb, and so forth. And if you happen to be in environments where, people can easily get past that, then, those becomes non-issues.
Very insightful. So one of the things when Maurice and I sat down and talked about the idea of a podcast, when we were thinking about, okay, what is the purpose of it? We really settled on this idea that we wanted to unite the Black and Brown communities, and that language may play a part in that. And you said that perfectly in your point that you made earlier about how knowing another language is really a lens through which you can connect to that culture. What do you think can be done to increase the number of Black youth who are actively working to learn another language?
So, I mean, learning other languages is much easier when you have access to the environment, and for those who happen to be in places where 2 or 3 languages are spoken, they will get it. It will happen very easily. Now, for most of us who are not fortunate to be in that situation, the question is, well, how do you learn that? I think the schools are certainly it's a beginning point, but certainly not enough. I mean, I know there's technology, all those things. People learn differently, and it comes to really people's motivations. But I think I will say a couple of things. The one is just the practical part of actually getting the resources and the technicalities and so forth, and people's motivations and interests. And for those who are inclined, and school resources can be a beginning. So no small learning is small. Even if you learn 2 words, that is better than no words. So for anybody in school, they say, oh well, you don't learn much in the Spanish class or in that class. I will say learn what you get there, and then you can move forward to something else. So that is but I understand that, of course, resources are extremely limited. Especially when people don't have free time too, right? But I think on the other side of it, I think and there may be a lot of people who may not be fortunate to actually acquire or to learn to speak a language, or to really, even though they may be connected or related to the culture. And I think this is, for me, and my own children actually falls into this situation. So I cannot really tell you here that I'll be able to actually have my children speak, any of the languages that I speak, because we are really not in that environment. I'm trying, but it's actually challenging, especially when you talk of like languages that are not written down, when you cannot just get it from a curriculum. But I think one of the things that we really have to think about is, if language is culture, and in the absence of actually you being able to speak the language as a technical team, what other ways can you actually relate to that culture? Can you actually affiliate and actually have identity with a culture that you don't speak the language? And I think yes, and I think for most of us, this may be the case. So, and that kind of affinity, or that kind of, if you wish, like sentimental, symbolic affinity, is a very important. In fact, I mean, to give you some practical examples, we have forum, community forums, among the Fulani people here in the United States, and it's a very huge, diverse group of people. And some of the people actually don't speak Fulani because their parents actually never lived in places where Fulani was the primary language, but they are Fulani, but they don't speak the language Fulani, but they do relate culturally. And I think to draw a lesson from the experience and effort of those particular people, what I see, one, they make effort to learn as much as they can, but sometimes even when they don't, they learn the values, they learn the stories, the histories, so they can tell you the histories of the Fulani people without being able to speak Fulani. They can tell you what the values of Fulani people without actually being able to speak Fulani. So I think I would think of it in those 2 ways. Certainly wonderful to be able to learn the technical part of it, but if that is not the case, also think of it actually as you can transmit the culture you can teach the other culture in the language that they know. And that is also good. That is also okay if that is the only option available.
We so appreciate the time that you have taken and given to this today. I think some of the things that you have said go perfectly with our mission and vision for Black, Brown, and Bilingual. It is typically our tradition when we are ending a podcast to ask one another, and today we're going to ask you, what is one thing that you want those that are going to pick up this podcast and listen, what do you want them to walk away with?
Well, I think I want all of those people to actually first and foremost reflect about themselves, their lives, who they are, and if they happen to be among people who are privileged in the context of the society in which they live in, that is privileged by being a member of a majority group or worldwide or whatever it is, to really give some thought about how did they get that privilege? Is it something of their own making, or is it some inheritance, or just endowing them and so forth? And I want them to actually also begin to imagine the people from the other side of the angle. So for those who may be a racial minority or a linguistic minority or a disadvantaged economic person, and really ask themselves, how did that person come to be in that position? So I think by trying to really picture yourself in the shoes of the other person, and trying to actually picture the other person, how, what that potentially can do, it can allow us to really begin to see ourselves in the lens of the other people. So all of this is, so we live in a context today in which language, culture, has been, this is not new in the world, but certainly now that we live in it has been abused and it has been politicized for destructive purposes. Nationalisms, all kinds of ideas of superiority of one group or another, whether it is said explicitly or not. But my experiences across all of those places is that actually bias, greed and whatnot, these are not an attribute of any one particular people. All human beings are prone to behave in those same ways, and all human beings are prone to behave in good ways. So my experiences in diversity, linguistic diversity, diversity of places, cultural diversity, helps me actually see other people, as part of really humanity, who just have to be assigned a given label or happen to be found themselves in given condition. Again, I don't mean to imply that nobody takes responsibility for themselves and so forth, but we all live the life somehow that has actually been given to us in some ways, and along the way we try to modify it in one way or the other. So I think the lesson for everybody is that think deeply really about the other person, and if you also happen to be among the disadvantaged people, think very deeply about the other people from the other side. What are some of the things that actually you can teach them? What are some of the things that actually you can do for yourself to improve? Ultimately, it is if you're opportune to be in a context or a situation in which you can actually have a dialogue with the other person, or to pass information that makes somebody think of every moment really as an opportunity to actually teach and learn. So. I think that's that is really my own little advice for all of us, because ultimately what that will only do, our well-being as a person depends on the well-being of the entities in which we live in. Nobody's actually going to be great if actually the people around you are not feeling great. And we can all do something about that by beginning to have honest understandings of other people, and that begins by you picturing yourself in their own shoes.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better ourselves. Thank you so much for joining us today. You definitely gave us a lot to think about, and I know that the listeners are going to walk away with some profound things to ponder. So thank you again. I am one of your hosts, Lisette Jacobson.
I'm your other host, Maurice McDavid.
Muchas gracias for tuning in.
Adios.